There's history here.
And here.
There's history there.
History is everywhere.
Thank you all for having me here. So, most of us have probably a photograph like this one. This comes from my own family's history. And it's a very nice photograph of a very nice looking lady, looking very, I don't know, she's looking off into the distance at something or somebody, I don't know, thinking, pondering life, and wondering why nobody put her name on the back of the photograph. Because we have no idea who she is, or where she was from, or when she was, except for the clues that her clothing gives us. And we'll talk more about her in a little bit in the future here, but how many of you have at least one of these pictures in your... Okay, so most of us have those. I just was showing off some photographs that I have from a neighbor of mine who had a yard sale, and he had a whole shoebox full of them, and he said, I don't know who they are, you can have them for $5. And I was thrilled because they're beautiful photographs, but I was also sad because he doesn't know who they are and they mean nothing to him now because of that. So I'm hoping to give you all some clues to be able to start to figure out who some of these missing people are in your family. And I just turned it off here. Nope, there we go. And my other little warning here for you ahead of time. This is a great story here. This is his Find a Grave page. Tells you he was born in 1752 and died in 1845. Why are you laughing? Yeah. Well, a Revolutionary War soldier, right? So here he is as a young man in the Revolutionary War. No. Why not?
Bowler hat?
Oh, no photography. Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. I wish I had a prize for you. Yes. This picture was, up until recently, all over the place on the internet. It was on Ancestry. If you just Google searched William Cheek, this photograph came up. Because somebody, and I will leave that person nameless, looked at that picture and liked it and attached it to their Ancestry.com family tree and said it was William Cheek. And other people said, oh my, he must have not been a soldier during the Revolutionary War. He must have been like a newspaperman because he's not in a uniform, he's in civilian clothes. But look, you can see the tents in the background, so clearly he's a Revolutionary War soldier. Except I actually personally know the photographer. I even have met the young man in the picture. Zane Healy is a friend of mine who's an amateur photographer. Back in the day when I used to do Civil War reenacting, Zane took that photograph of that young man and posted it on his Flickr page. And you can't probably see it, but right here it says copyright Zane Healy. And somebody took the sepia tone version of it, cut him off at the knees to cut off the copyright, because if there's no word that says copyright, then it's not stealing, right? No, 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 no. And they posted it, and everybody else who has William Cheek in their family history said, yay, a picture of William Cheek, and they attached it to their trees. So Zane, bless his heart, wrote to me one day when he saw this, and he was rather bemused about the whole thing and wanted to know what to do about it. So we're in the process of trying to get Ancestry to pull all these off of everybody's family trees, and it happened once, and then they're back up there again. If you Google search William Cheek, it won't show up anymore. The person who had him on the Find a Grave page has taken it down and was embarrassed. So just as a reminder, the first photograph of a person that we have was made in the 1830s. There are no pictures of your ancestors' photographs prior to 1830. There may be portraits, there may be pencil sketches, there may be big, beautiful, grand oil paintings, but there are no photographs of your ancestors prior to 1830. Sadly, but that's the truth. I wanted to also show these two photographs here as an example of some older ladies' photographs. And this is, and Barbara, we were talking about this just before class, this is a sad but true reality when we're talking about photographs of older ladies, is that prior to really between 1900 and 1920, there was not a lot of ready-made clothing available. you made your own clothing. And as somebody who has done this, you have some paper patterns, but then you make a fabric pattern for your clothes that fits you personally the right way, and then that's what you go with for the rest of your life, because making a new pattern doesn't work so well. And so older ladies tend to be wearing what they wore in their 30s and 40s. And so they're going to be wearing out-of-date clothes. So you're looking at these ladies right here. She's wearing an 1840s outfit. It could have been taken in the 1840s. The photograph could have also been taken in the 1880s. We just don't know because she's an older lady. This lady is wearing an 1860s outfit, and again, it could have been taken later. We don't know. Well, we have some clue because these are actually, this is a glass plate photograph, this is a tintype, and that helps us to date them a little bit. So just as a word of warning, if you've got an older woman in a photograph and you can pick her time of her clothing, that just tells you the earliest it could possibly be. It may be later than that. And I'm looking to see if I wanted to talk about this. Let me go back here for a minute first. One other thing I wanted to talk about here is when you're, nope, I'm going to do this one first. We also can take other things in the photograph to help us date them. So in this, we've got an old car. Anybody good at recognizing cars?
It's a Chevy.
It's a Chevy, okay. What year?
32.
This is really interesting. My husband has just recently gotten interested in, so we spent a lot of time looking at old cars. Yay! And I recognized that this has a rounded cover front end here. This, and I found the photograph of it then. It's a 1918 Chevy. And so that tells us, again, the earliest this photograph could have been made of the baby. It might be later. We can't tell what the condition of the vehicle is in the photograph because the photograph is sort of an old photograph here. But we can use other things in the picture. I had a client once who was just so amazed at my wonderful ability to figure things out from the photograph. He said, "When was this picture of my parents made?" And I sent it back to him almost right away. I said, 1932. "How did you know?" "Well, it has a car, and in the front of the car is a license plate, and on the license plate is the registration tag that says 32. That's how I could tell. So real obvious clues there. Signs, street signs, business signs. You may have to go and do some research into a certain town or a city to find out when that business was on that street corner. Maybe look for other old photographs that would show you that business with that signage in the front. But you can use other things besides just the people in the pictures. And then you can also use the imprimer. Whoops, I'm going to get this right yet. So a lot of these paper photographs have the photographer's information on the bottom. Sometimes it's really easy to see like this one. Other times it's just impressed in the cardboard and it's a little harder to read. Please resist the temptation to use chalk on it to figure out what it says. But this one, it was one of my neighbors. I don't care I don't know who these people are, so I don't care. Well, we know it's W.A. Furman from Stoughton, Wisconsin. A Google search helps you to go from there to learn that he was a Norwegian photographer who lived between 1865 and 1915 in that town. That doesn't help us a whole lot. That's a 50-year time span. But sometimes photographers moved from place to place. And so we can tell by when that photographer was there, or we might use the Google search that tells us he lived in that town and took photographs between these years. And then we go to our handy dandy city directories and we look up photographers in the city directory and we find out when he was working at that specific address, because sometimes they'll have the street on them. So there are a lot of background sorts of things in a photograph that can help us to date them. One more thing I want to talk about then is handling old photographs. My encouragement to everybody is when you're dealing with an old photograph, the first thing you want to do to protect the photograph is to make a high quality scan of it to be able to use for your research. I recommend 1,000 DPI or higher. Most of our home scanners don't have that capability. So that means you got to take your pile of old photographs into someplace like Kinko's that would have a higher quality one, or I don't know. I don't know what you all have here. If you've got any scanning equipment that might have something of that nature, if you've got a lot, it might be worth it to spend $150 to buy a really good scanner and do it yourself. I don't know, but make a high quality scan, because how many of you guys have seen Ken Burns's The Civil War on PBS? Okay, remember all those old photographs? And you start out and you're looking at this really great picture of a person, and then as the camera pulls back, you realize it's this little tiny person in this gigantic photograph. These old photographs had wonderful clarity and detail, and that's why I encourage you to make a high quality scan of it, because then you can zoom in on it and see. There may be a button or a pin that somebody's wearing on their coat that will help you to identify an organization to which they belonged, that will help you to identify which family member that person is. And then I like using a scan because I can use it on my computer. I can print it if I want to, and I'm not hurting the image. One good quality scan, and then put it away. Use one of these books up here. I saw one, yes, Preserving Your Family Photographs. Once you make your scans, come grab this book and figure out what to do to keep them safe so that you don't mess them up and they're around for another 100 years. Magnifying glasses are great tools also. Make sure you have clean hands. I can't believe I tell people that, but I've had people, eating lunch and holding old photographs at the same time. Don't write on them with a pen. Once you figure out who it is, or you can narrow it down, a nice soft pencil. If the photograph is, obviously you can't write on a tin type, and obviously you can't write on a glass plate photograph, but if it's cardboard or paper, a pencil on the back with the photograph laying on a hard surface like glass, so that you can be sure not to make an imprint of what you do on it. Don't touch anything other than the edge, and please learn from my mistakes. Do not try to clean the glass plates unless you are 100% sure that the side you're about to start on with Windex does not have the chemicals on it. So right here, see that little blank space that over here is now black? Yeah, guess who didn't know which side the print was on? And I squirted some Windex, and I went like this, and I said, oh, that's not just dirt I just wiped off. So lucky for me, I didn't go right across this poor lady's face. So it's better off to not clean it if you can't be certain which side is which. So what we're going to talk about today are the reason for the title we have here for this is Collars, Coiffures, and Corsets. We're talking about the hairstyles, the bodice of the dress, and the corset, the underpinning that makes the shape of the body in this. I am going to be horribly sexist. We're mostly going to talk about women. The reason being, men's fashions changed very, very little between 1830 and 1930, with the exception of some high collars, going from a bow tie to a long tie or a wide tie, and some lapel changes. There's not a lot of changes that were made in men's fashions. I have an hour to talk, and I've got 80 years of fashion to get through. I had to cut something. Those of you who want to fight with me about not talking about men, we can fight afterwards. But for right now, the women's fashions are more likely to let us make those determinations. The men's fashions, the distinctions are so minute and so difficult to pinpoint. And just like ladies would wear their clothing that they're comfortable with 20 and 30 years later, a gentleman who has paid good money for a wool coat is not going to pay money for a new style wool coat 5 years from now. He will wear that thing till it wears out. And if you haven't owned a wool coat, let me promise you, you can probably die in it before it'll wear out. So 1850s is what we're going to start with today. And I'm just going to talk about in general with things. And these are all in general what happened. Almost all of my photographs come from the Library of Congress or some other, what's the word?
Public domain.
Thank you. I'm glad somebody's thinking today. You can find others as well. If you want to continue to look, go to the Library of Congress, do ladies of the 19 whatevers, ladies of the 18 whatevers, and you'll get lots of photographs there. So 1850s women parted their hair in the middle. Their ears are probably showing, maybe not completely, but they probably haven't covered their ears. They've got their hair pulled back in a buns or a braid at the back of their neck. And the volume is to the side of their face, to some extent or another, because what was beautiful then was a fat face. We wanted width to our faces, not height, in the 1850s. So you see how her hair is sort of rolled back on the sides to give that illusion of width. And here are two other examples. So this is Marina Davis, the president of the Confederacy's wife. She's probably got what we call rats in her hair. They're not really rats. You would take, you know when you brush your hair, you end up with hair in your brush? You pull that out, and you keep making a wrap of it, because it's the same color as your hair. You sort of wrap it all up in itself, and then you wad it up in your, like you roll it up in your hair like a hair roller. And that way, if it shows through, it doesn't matter because it's your hair color. And it gives you that volume. And for those of us with thin, fine hair, it's a great way to make your hair look like there's more to it. This lady on the right, yep, she's on the right. What she has here, it looks like, are just lots of little tiny ringlets. Maybe she was ill. Sometimes when you got sick, they would cut your hair off. They decide that make you feel better. I don't know why. But it looks like it's little tiny ringlets. She's used a little tiny curling iron to make that volume on the side. The 1850s bodice has a wide, flat collar. So it's not going to be standing up on the neck. It's across the collarbones. It could be anywhere from 2 inches wide to almost all the way to the shoulders. The sleeves, and I'm going to be using this term a lot, are set into the arm side. Sewers, any sewers in here? So you know how you've got the front of your bodice and the back of it, and you sew it together, and there's a hole where the sleeves get set in. These clothing of the 1850, the sleeves aren't set in up here at the shoulder. They're set in down lower than the shoulder. So you can see that she doesn't really have, her shoulders are right here, but the way this is folded, it continues on down. Broad shoulders was considered attractive at that time period, so they're going for that effect of these broad but sloping shoulders. We don't want manly shoulders. And then the corset was designed to sort of flatten the bosom. I'll be as genteel as I can here, but also to support it. And you can see by the way, even there's that she's sitting, you can tell there is a bosom there, but it's not prominent. And I can't be any more specific than that without being tacky. 1850s skirt is full and rounded. You'll see a lot of flounces or layers to it, potentially. The more flounces will tell you something about their economic status, because it takes more fabric. And that means you got more money. So that's what we're looking at in the 1850s. We're not going to talk a lot about skirts, because most photographs, people are sitting, but there are some when they're standing, so we do want to make sure you have that awareness. This is from an Ontario museum, classic 1850s dress. Round, like a bell, flounces in the skirt. We've got the sloped shoulders. Way down there is the arm size. So this whole piece of fabric right here extends all the way. It's almost like a sleeve is built into the front of the bodice and the back, and the sleeves are set in halfway down the arm. And then there's no collar right here, which means she would have pinned her collar into the neck of her dress. Your collars you replaced frequently, because that's where you sweat and get dirty. The dress doesn't get laundered very often. And as somebody who has lived for a week in those things, I get, oh my goodness. So they're kind of nasty. She would have had undersleeves. You can just barely see it right there. So those would be something that would be, there's no elastics, they'd be tied on around her arm and then have a cuff. And that's something that you could change every day. So you might wear the same dress. Most ladies, again, you have to hand make this. You don't have a sewing machine. So you're hand sewing this. So most women had one or two dresses. Some of us are old enough to remember having our Sunday dress and then our everything else during the week kind of clothes. That's what most women had. Their one good dress for church, for going to town, and then their everyday kind of dress. So you got to wear the same thing every day. You might sometimes see a photograph of somebody wearing a sheer dress. Marina Davis is wearing a see-through dress. Scandalous. No, sensible. She lived in Mississippi. Okay, that's all we have to say. But she's wearing all those clothes, and so this is all sheer fabric, but right here where it's dark, that's her undergarments. And she's wearing all of her undergarments, and they're a dark color. It looks like in this picture. That black and white photographs are difficult, by the way. That could be red. It could be blue. It could even, we don't know what color it is, so it looks black, but who knows what color it is. It's sheer, but all that's really showing is what would have been showing if she was wearing a ball gown, her shoulders. She's even got her collar on still, and her dress is buttoned all the way up to the top of her neck. And then the sleeves are also sheer as well. The skirt could be sheer as well, and she'd have all of her undergarments underneath. Yes, ma'am?
Are we looking at her corset cover under there?
Corset cover was something that was more from the 1880s. This time period, what she's wearing is, she's got drawers and a corset, and then over all of that she's got a chemise, which is kind of like your grandma's nightgown. And then she's got however many layers of petticoats, possibly a crinoline or a hoop over that, and then the dress goes on top of all of that. So there's not the corset cover was more the 1880s, 1890s. In this one she's wearing the chemise. That's just a one-piece garment that goes down to about mid-calf sort of thing. But that's a great question. 1860s. Good news for you, those of you who are frantically taking notes, you can pretty much say ditto. Okay? 1860s hair, like the 1850s, part in the middle, ears probably show. The back of the neck is where we're securing the hair, down below, lower, and the volume is still to the sides of the face. And these two photographs, this poor girl, I just always feel so sorry for her. She just looks so unhappy in this photograph. Your ancestors who look very frowny-faced in their photographs, we had no ability to take good flash photography in the early days. So hold a smile for 60 seconds. And it starts to look like this. So most people just sat with a straight face because you can't have a pleasant-looking smile for 60 seconds. So you just kind of sit there with your relaxed face. And most of our relaxed faces are kind of grumpy looking. So I chose this photograph because I wanted you to notice, besides the fact that this is a very famous photograph here. Anybody know who this is? Just recently got found and everybody was very excited about this. This is Harriet Tubman. But her hair is rolled on the sides. So just because your ancestor was African American doesn't mean she wasn't paying attention to fashion. So she's still trying to get that wide face like everybody else is, hair parted in the middle, ears partially showing. The bodice, the collar now could be flat or standing up. So we've got a little bit of difference there. The sleeves are still set low so that they're below the sloping look, below the shoulders. The corset has changed though. Can you see the difference in her body there? Now we're supporting the bosom and it's also being uplifted. So the corsets are made differently at this point. So that's one of the very most obvious differences between an 1850s and an 1860s is, does she have a figure? And then the corsets are also beginning to create the appearance of a smaller waist. That's more feminine looking as well. And those people who still think that Scarlett O'Hara is 16-inch waist and removing ribs, none of those things happened. I've seen no evidence of anybody removing ribs. That's major surgery. And they barely figured out anesthesia for the Civil War. So they're not going to pull your ribs out with under ether just so you can have a tinier waist. I do love this photograph though, in the case and everything. 1860s skirts are no longer that round bell shape. They've become an oval shape. And most of the weight of it, if you will, is in the back. This is 1869, so it's a later, and this is Godeys Lady's book, so it's kind of like Vogue. Nobody wears what you see in a Vogue magazine. Nobody wore what you see in Godeys Lady's book. You took this and then you made it for real people. But it does give you an idea of how the skirts are now moving, so the weight is behind. We still have a hoop in the front, so your belly isn't right there, but the weight of the skirt is behind you. And so you can see with this one, you see how it's almost a bell shape, but then we've got more weight back here. And all the fancy work on here. All this is hand sewn. Little pieces of flat ribbon. There's the whole picture of Harriet Tubman. Hey, she's got on a sheer bodice as well. This is a real interesting one to me because she's got, this is her skin we're seeing up here. That's her undergarments right here. And then all this dark is a dark colored lining. And it's polished cotton. You can even see from the shine on it that it's a polished cotton, something that she's wearing. So it's not quite as sheer as Marina Davis's was, but it's still that effort to get a little bit of breeze in there so you cannot be quite so dying. And then sometimes you discover a lot about your family by what has been done to the people's portraits. So here we have a lovely photograph of a soldier and presumably his wife, because you will notice that she has wedding ring on her finger. And this has been hand painted on, by the way. You see the little pink on his cheeks and the gold buttons and the watch chain and her gold brooch and her gold ring. I don't know what happened here. I'm telling myself it's a second wife. You know, that she died and the second wife was like, and scratched that right off there. I don't know. Maybe a kid was mad at his mom one day or whatever. But so sometimes you'll find out things about your family in your photographs that maybe you weren't expecting to learn. 1870s, things start to change. 1870s, we still have the center part in our hair, but now we're moving towards height instead of width. And one of the big changes is this thing called a fringe. We call it your bangs today. This older lady doesn't have the fringe, but you do see the height. Her hair is piled up on top of her head instead of down below on her neck. This young lady's hair is mostly behind her, but she's got the fringe going. Any of you fans of Little Women? Yeah, I've read that book every year since I was in 4th grade, which was like 100 years ago. Do you remember when the scene when the girls are trying to make a fringe to send Meg off to the ball? And this is what they're trying to accomplish. And I think same thing happened to her that happened to Meg. Look how short this hair is up here. I think a lot of it got burned off by that curling iron. So, but nevertheless, she soldiered on and got her photograph made anyway. The bodice, the attention is drawn to the face now. We really are starting to focus on the face of these ladies. So we want a taller, thin face, and we're looking at it. So we've got bows and lacy collars and all kinds of decorative work at the neck. So you look at this and it's like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of stuff on here. We've got the high lace collar, we've got a bow right here, a brooch, and then all this fancy work on the bodice. Everything is making you look up at her face to see what she looks like here. The corset is much longer now. Corsets used to stop right at your waist. Now this is beginning to go longer, sort of midway down your stomach. We're starting to flatten the stomach, smooth out the hips a little bit. You'll see why in a moment. The sleeves, hey, look, right there at the shoulder. First time it's been that way since photography. And oftentimes you'll see very large, ornate cuffs on their dress as well. The skirt is becoming more narrow and close-fitting, especially in the front. This is also the era of the bustle. And I always thought bustles were just one size, like it was just this big half of a mushroom sort of blob in the back. They had oval-shaped. They had them oval this way and oval this way, and they were round, and they got to be enormous, and sometimes they had they were their own person. They had wreaths on them and bows and ribbons and I'm kidding you, a floral wreath on your behind. And also trains. So we've got lots of attention to your face, and then just lots of stuff on your back end as well. Most of which you're not going to see in photographs, unfortunately. However, this is a good example of it. So this lady's got her hair pulled back. We don't have a lot of height, which is somewhat difficult to do with African Americans at that time period in their hair. But look at all this at the face, at the neck. We've got an undershirt, a blouse of some sort here. We've got this frilled collar, this giant bow, lots of fuss to look at your face. And then she's got a bustle. There's a pretty good sized bustle back there with all the bows and the ribbons and everything on there as well. So that's a good example of that. Another photograph, and here we're looking at the train. So it's not like we think of Princess Diana's 25-foot long wedding dress train, but it's something hanging on the ground. By the way, this is only going to happen if your family's got a certain amount of money. How come? You got to clean it. And it's hard to clean that stuff once you drag it through the mud. So if you can't drag it through the mud, they would make these amazing things. They had these like strings and buttons sort of things so you could pull up the sides of your skirt and hook them up here so everything wouldn't be dragging on the ground. And then you have these really fancy undergarments so people could see all that pretty stuff. But it gets to be a lot. Her hair definitely piled up high, and sleeves are right at the shoulder, and then fuss, 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 fuss around her neck. Oh, and big fancy cuffs. Classic 1870s. More 1870s, remember that young lady, we saw her before, so just a few things here to add to it. Cuffs, we can see there and there. The fuss around the neck, oh my goodness, the fuss around the neck. You can see here that the skirts are narrow, and they're more form-fitting in the front. We don't have hoops. If you were a hoop skirt maker, a crinoline maker, you hated the 1870s because we're not doing that anymore. And we move into the 1880s. Hair's beginning to change dramatically now. 1880s, we're still brushing it straight back. There's not going to be an effort to have this severe part and pull the sides down here. If your hair naturally parts that way, so be it. But we're just going to pull it back. It's a lot softer looking. We're still not just letting it lay on your shoulders, but it's pulled back and it's sort of a softer, more feminine, as opposed to militant kind of a hairstyle. And we're still working on height, not width. The bodice, we've now moved to high, tight collars, and they might be part of the actual bodice of the dress, or it might be an underblouse. Again, so we get sweaty on that, we can wash that and then change it out. Corsets are longer. They're fitted very tightly at the waist. They're now kind of inching down past halfway, down your abdomen. And the other thing I want you to start noticing for 1880s is the poof at the top of the sleeve. This is a good example. This is an early 1880, this is actually 1880 photograph. This one is later. You see how it's starting to get poofy. We're moving into that Legofmutton sleeve. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll see that in a few minutes here. And so the shoulder is still at the top. The dress is made so that the shoulder is where you're expected to be. But now we start getting this little bit of a poof here at the top. The skirt is becoming very narrow and very fitted across the front, and excessively trimmed is a fair statement. The trains are almost gone, or they're very, very small. And I want you just to think about what we see on like this lady's dress right here. So she's got a layer that goes down to here with this dark colored ribbon. Then she's got these box pleats, another layer. And then down here, we got more box pleats of the dress. And then down here, that's not her undergarment, that's another layer of her skirt. And so all of that takes a lot of fabric, and it's all very elaborate, and it's still handmade. Yes, there are sewing machines, and they're the kind that you do this. You have to hand crank them, or you got the foot treadle. So you can do that, and they're becoming more popular in the middle class, which is probably what's allowing this to happen. Because if you have to hand sew all of that, you're probably not going to. So this dress, like I said, is 1880. And you see how very straight it is here, or flat in the front. And you might look at this and say, that's not a very fancy skirt, Kate. It actually is. I don't know if you can see this. That's a hand-quilted front of the bottom of the skirt there. And those are tiny, tiny little, probably like as big as your thumbnail. It's been quilted on that. So that's one way of being fancy. We also start moving towards bigger hats in this time period. And this is Mrs. Luella Parsons. She was a famous labor leader of the 1880s. And you'll notice that her hair it kind of doesn't look like it's being confined. We still have that fringe, that loose hair in the front. It's just sort of pulled up and tucked under her nice big hat. And there's, I think, a really nice picture of the idea of that sort of just gather the hair up and then put it in place. And we're not going to worry about it being all tightly secured. And this lovely painting class is a great example then. This was taken in 1889, so we're moving to, again, right here, these sleeves is what I want you to notice. These puffy sleeves at the top here. Now the 1890s, we're moving into a very different and much more feminine looking. And some people, you might say, well, those others looked very feminine, but they were also strictly corseted. Well, this is going to be pretty strictly corseted too, but you'll see what I mean. So the 1890s hair is still confined, but it's becoming very high and very decorated. You don't just put your hair up in a bun. You put up in a bun, and then you've got a fancy comb, which is what we're probably seeing over here. This is Ida Wells, just a pearl comb to hold it up. This lady's hat, I just love it. Does this make anybody else think of the Wicked Witch of the West? I was like, oh my goodness, when she was a teenager, this was her. So, but you've got this big height going here. She doesn't have the hair to go high, but she's got the hat to do it with. The bodice is becoming, we're moving that trim off the skirts and we're moving it back up to the bodice. We have the high, tight, stiff collars right here. The Legofmutton sleeves are beginning to come into effect here with an exaggerated poof at the top and then very tight from the elbow to the wrist. And you'll see some of those in a moment here. And the skirt is what we call a tulip bell skirt. It's snug over the hips and then flares at the bottom. This is a good example. So here's the Legofmutton sleeve. See that big giant poof? And then it's just skin tight from the elbow. We also start seeing some bare flesh on the arm, and it's not ball gown time of day. So it's taken us a while to get to that point in life. But examples, the hair's up, softly confined though, it's not real tight. This is also beginning to start to move into that Gibson Girl look. We're not there yet, but you start to see that. And the big hats. Oh, they get way worse. Now, I have my own pet theory. I haven't been able to prove it, and I don't think I will, because the people who could answer it for me are all dead. But I want to talk about ladies' hats in the 1900s in a minute and how they actually affected some other important things that were going on in the 1900s. Hair is becoming, we've got the Pompadour, this big, loosely gathered, elaborate knot, all soft and pretty and feminine, like this. By the way, for those of us who look at that hair and say, oh my goodness, I would have been just a horrible misfit in the 1890s because my hair wouldn't do that. Remember the rats from the 1850s and 60s? We're still doing that same thing here. That lady doesn't have that kind of hair. She's got big blobs of stuff underneath of her hair that's the support for all of the rest of that. So lots of artificiality going on here. And huge, elaborately decorated hats. That's nothing compared to some of the ones we're going to see here. The bodice is gone way extreme, where like we have this super feminine appearance that's completely manufactured. The corset now extends all the way from basically your armpits down to the tops of your thighs, where that whole your whole middle part of your body is being forced to a certain shape. And it's an S-curve shape, with the bosom is protruding forward And it's sort of, well, they call it the pigeon breast appearance. So that's kind of what they're going for. Not something that we would consider to be most flattering, but that's the look they have. And then S shape, so we've got to go the other direction, and the back end is sticking out too. So the sleeves are very puffed at the shoulders, like you can see, and tight from the elbow to the cuff. And the skirts have changed again. They're heavy, elaborately decorated. I can't imagine dragging them around with you. This is what the skirts are looking like. And you'll notice the very different look. They're both form-fitting, but this is sort of, I don't know, it's a little bit looser, maybe a little, some people might say more modest or less revealing. That doesn't leave a whole lot to the imagination anymore about that lady's shape. Both are completely acceptable in the 1900s. Both are completely, you know, respectable. I like this picture because this is Alice Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt's, I think, favorite daughter. And she's wearing her, you can't see much of the shape of her body because she's sitting, but you notice how she's sitting slouched? Yeah, you kind of got to sit that way in that corset. Sitting up straight isn't going to work because then you're sitting like this. So if you're kind of stuck in this position all the time, sitting down, you kind of just sit back like that. You lounge. You either lounge or you tip forward and fall out of your chair. And again, we see her big hat. Here we've got Mrs. Roosevelt, the president's wife, Theodore's wife, and you get a better idea. This is, of course, an older lady, so she is, she's also very wealthy, so she can dress the fashion because she's not making her clothes, somebody else is. And it's not quite as extreme, but you get an idea of that S shape, that pigeon front, and she's with her son right here. We'll talk more about children's clothes in a bit. How's that for a hat? How's that for a dress? Yeah. What we have going on here, this is, I wanted to make sure I get her name, Camille Clifford. She was the original Gibson Girl. So you'll notice that the puff is gone from the top of her sleeve there. We just got it skin tight the whole way. It's pretty much skin tight everywhere till you get to her knees. I don't know why bother at that point. I guess so she can walk. But that is also that's a classic of that time period. And yet it's somehow still modest. Her neck is covered, her arms are covered down past her elbows, her feet are covered all the way to the floor, and she's wearing a hat. But look how big that hat is. Well, doors, this is my theory. Think about cars of the early 1900s. And we usually will see them in, and you've got to go look at the actual like 1900 to 1920. Some of them have enormously high headroom in there. I mean, more than any car, like a van size headroom for what we're used to. And it's a car. You got to get that hat in the car. So that's also, I think, why we have some of the doors that we have in those cars. Ladies have to be able to climb into the car with their hats because, well, respectable ladies don't go anywhere without their hats on. So they've got to be able to fit in the car. I think cars were designed to get those hats in the door and seated. It was up to them to keep them on once they started going then. A little less extreme there version of the same idea though, Mrs. Roosevelt and the other daughter, Ethel. And then just some more Gibson Girl photos. I love these because it's just, it's so amazing to me what was considered respectable 117 years ago. So, big hat, poofy hair, not all her hair. Her hair is just the outside, and there's a whole structure of other stuff underneath. And we already saw hers. And again, look at this on the front. Look at all that hair. So it's all been curled around other hair. 1910s, things start to change dramatically. Hair's going to still be piled high. Hats are still going to be enormous and elaborate, but things are starting to change. We start to get more natural looking curls are there, and it's not quite as big. What I like about this photograph is we have two young ladies, probably in their early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and then their mother here. And you can see the difference. These two girls' hairstyles are even slightly different, and mom's is is of an older era. And their dresses, we'll see in a few minutes, you can tell, are different as well. The bodice of the 1910s, that S-curve look is gone. We're done with it. Never shall it return. We now have the flat front corset, which is just what it sounds like. And you can kind of get an idea of what it's doing with this lady's photograph. We're kind of back almost to the 1850s where everything is supported and flattened. And we've got a more natural waist though. We've gone from that extremely tight waist to much less restrictive waist. It might look like the bosom is no longer even as high. So you might think, well, these ladies are running around corsetless. That's where the loose woman phrase came from. They aren't loose women. There's nothing loose there. It's just everything's being held in place in a different part of the body now. We start to move to a more smock style front and V-necks become more popular. It's a very different look. So just a reminder quickly, that, and then just a few years later, we're going to that. A dramatic difference, isn't it? A huge change. The skirts, they even briefly in the 1910s, we have hobble skirts. They're just what they sound like. So it's going to be a skirt that comes out, plenty of room here at the seat and the thighs and the knees, and then it gets down to your ankles, and it's got this much circumference. So you walk like this. And the women didn't stand for that for very long. They're like, okay, that was not going to work. But if you've got somebody, a photograph of somebody in a hobble skirt, early teens, yay! Now you know who it is. Hopefully. Skirts start getting shorter, as much as 8 inches above the ankle for the first time. And we start having one-piece dresses that are just straight. So you can see how very different, I mean, it's like that 1900s look, but yet it's not as laced up and artificially designed here. This is very early. This is 1911. Anybody know who these folks are? Who? It's actually, it's Woodrow Wilson and his family. Yeah, that's Wilson. Yeah, because he's such a smiling kind of guy. So here's Mrs. Wilson, and then the 3 daughters. And you can see they've got a much more, it's moving towards that 1920s look, that boyish look. It's not quite there. We're still feminine, we still have a bosom, we still have a waist, but it's not as accentuated. I love this photograph of this lady. I've lost her name now, but she was one of a U.S. ambulance drivers in World War I. And so she's very fashionable, but notice she's got a shorter skirt. We can see her ankles. Oh my goodness. And it's kind of a straight look to that dress. It's hard to describe, because it's not the 20s sheath dress, but yet it's not that highly corseted, pinched and pulled look of the teens and the the 1900s and the 1890s. Of course, you know what to expect in the 1920s. We all have an image of flapper in our head, right? 20s, the hair is much shorter. It's often crimped. We might have a bob hairstyle. If you have long hair, if you keep your person's photograph, they've kept their long hair through the 1920s, it's going to be less elaborate. The cloche hat we'll see in the 20s and then into the 30s as well, to a certain extent. I love this picture. This is Grace Coolidge. She's eating Girl Scout cookies. So, the bodice, we have for the first time elasticized undergarments. You cannot imagine how much that changed women's lives, and that's not the point of this, so I will leave it at that, but elastic for your undergarments. Just think about if everything else you wore, everything you have that's elastic, you had to tie on you instead. So, the boyish look is in. We've got a flat chest, no waist, or we make it look like there's no waist. Lots of belts and things that are designed to make it look like the appearance of no waist by dropping those waistlines down to your hips. And you can kind of see it here with Mrs. Coolidge. Her waist is up here, but we have the belt down here. And short sleeves are becoming very popular for daytime, even sleeveless. Skirts are going to be between ankle and knee height. And they're going to be straight, maybe slightly flared. Now, like I said, most of us have this image of what a flapper is, but we probably forgot one of the important parts of flapper clothes was your unclasped galoshes. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the quintessential flapper. Okay? We think of F. Scott Fitzgerald stuff, but this is a flapper. She's got her round hat, she's got her coat that's belted, but it's belted in such a way that we're not accentuating her waist. She's wearing straight front dress, and she's got her unhooked galoshes there. Totally flapper girl. I just love that. This is what most of us think of for flappers, right? If you got somebody with her stockings rolled down, 1920s, no question. That was the fad in that decade and that decade alone. Except I think briefly when I was in high school or junior high, I think we wore our socks rolled down like that. It was very weird. It might have just been from Western Pennsylvania, I don't know. But you'll notice the short hair all around, some really bad perms. We're going in to get our hair done that way too now, to try to have that crimped, bobbed look. So everything's very straight. We're trying not to accentuate our waists too much, although I do find it odd that this young lady has her shirt tucked into her waistband, because you wouldn't expect to see that normally, because that accentuates your waist immediately. Even the upper class, this is some Duchess and Duke in England, even the upper class wore that sort of thing. And so again, her coat is belted down below her waist to make it that sheath appearance there. And some other gals, very 20s, all of them. Belt down below, no belt at all, belt below, belt below, belt below. Oh, big giant necklaces, yes. Hats close right over the eyebrows for all of them except for her. So a little bit of difference there. And then I like this portrait because this is just an average family. They're on Lake Michigan, 1923. Mom and dad and the boys in their summer cottage. And mom is trying to emulate the 20s look. Mom's got a little more meat on her than most of the girls on the piano did. But she's still doing it. You see how she's still got that effort. She's not being sloppy. She's not, I don't care what I'm wearing my baggy dress too. She's trying to do that thing too with the clothes that she's got. So she's attempting to emulate that fashionable appearance. The last decade we're going to talk about is the 30s. I know I could do the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s, but then we start talking about the clothes that I was wearing in school, and I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing, and we're not going to do that. So, the 30s, I love this picture. This is a hairstyle picture. Just like when you go to get your hair cut now and you flip through all those magazines of haircuts, that's what this is. This is an officially approved, I think it was from L'Oreal, officially approved L'Oreal hairstyle for the 30s. Hair's going to be shorter, but we don't have those bobs now. We're going with something that's a little curled, more feminine. The hats are going to be tilted to the side. Think of all those glamorous movie stars. That's the look we're going for here. The bodice is more natural. They're still slender, but there's not that boyish look anymore. Curves are back. And short sleeves, again, and sleeveless, we continue to see those from the 20s on. Short sleeves and sleeveless clothing during the day is completely normal and respectable. Skirts might be very tailored, or they could be full, either or. And they could be anywhere between the knee and the ankle. I know, which doesn't help you a whole lot when I can't give you something specific. But you can tell this is very different than flip, 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 whoops, than that. Can you tell? 20s, 30s. You see the difference? So, because some people might say, oh, no, they're not the same. We've got, this is not a boyish look. None of these are boyish. They're slender ladies, yes. They're probably dieting within an inch of their life, because these are actually all actresses here. But they're not trying to look boyish. They've got curves. The hat, she still has a cloche style hat, but this hat like that, sort of tilted to the side, makes me think of Lauren Bacall or something. That's the style of hats. And so they're young ladies, just random girls here. I like this photograph for two reasons. One is we've got multi-generations, which means we also have multi-generations of gentlemen. Notice the guys' clothes look pretty much the same, except for the dude here with the open neck shirt. That's interesting to me. But we've got different generations of women. So grandmother, older ladies here, middle-aged lady, younger ladies, and a girl here. And their clothes all kind of give you an idea of different versions of that time period. They're all 1930s, but you can see that this is like those other girls that we saw in the 30s. This one is that more tailored look we talked about. This was the only example I have. I've got one in my own collection of a nice tailored 1930s appearance. These ladies are looking more earlier time period. They're not Gibson Girl looking, but they're certainly not dressed exactly like these girls are. And then this one right here in the middle is a little girl. And we'll talk about that here for a moment. Children's hair is the key for determining is that a little boy or a little girl. Because up until we get elastic and rubber pants, we put our children in dresses. Because that's the easiest way to clean up and to change their clothes. Girls' hair is parted in the center. Boys' hair is parted on one side or the other. It doesn't matter which. So, quiz. Girl or boy? Girl. Girl or boy? Boy. Girl or boy? Girl. It's hard to tell. I think there's a part right here in the center. So I think it's a girl. But if I found that it was Ralph instead of Roberta, I wouldn't be too upset about it. Now, somebody had asked me once, they said, what is with putting these girls in these off-the-shoulder dresses? We don't have zippers, so how do we close up clothes? We use buttons. You got to get your kid dressed in the morning. How have you tried to get your children or any child dressed in the morning and they don't want to get dressed? And you're fighting to get their arm through the sleeves, and they're tight, and you can't just go zip. No, you got to stand still, button, stand still, button, stand still. Crud, I buttoned it crooked. Unbutton, unbutton, unbutton. No, we make a big wide boat neck, so we just pull it over their head. It's easy on, easy off. That's all it is. Okay? This little guy just dressed up as cute as can be. Got his little pantaloons showing down here, his drawers. That's what this is too, by the way. Those are drawers. That's the long underwear. So hair part is what tells us girl or boy. Little Lord Fauntleroy suits will help you a little bit, but not a lot. They became popular starting in 1885, and people kept putting them on their kids until the 1920s. I don't know why. I think you're looking like you're wanting to get beat up when you're wearing that, but I don't know. There are all kinds of variations, but they're easily identified. They're almost always velvet, big collar, cuffs, the pants button to the shirt, and the buttons are visible. That was not an uncommon thing to do, but oftentimes you wouldn't make the buttons that visible for them. And of course the short pants there. But if you've got a photograph of a family member and they're wearing that little Lord Fauntleroy suit, it gives you at least that 35-year time period to start narrowing your focus of who that possibly could be. And hopefully it isn't three little guys in the suits like this. Hopefully there's a grown-up that you can kind of determine the date of the photograph more closely. And then breeching. That was not when whales jump out of the ocean. Breeching was when we put our little boys in their breeches. They've gone from their skirts to their pants. because they've been potty trained and they're thoroughly potty trained. Up until about 1890, that was when they were 5 years old. So if you see a little boy in long pants or short pants, you know, and it's, you know, depending on when the photograph is, if it was 1890 or before, then the kid's at least 5. If it's after that, this whole process began earlier, 3-year-olds. We've already started putting more pressure on our kids in 1890, and now you gotta be toilet trained by the time you're 3, instead of by the time you're 5. My grandson is going to be 3 this July. He's gonna have to keep wearing skirts. That's just all there is to it. So, what I find interesting about both of these photographs is, okay, first, girl or boy? Boy. Boy. Over here? Can't tell by the hair, but what can you tell by? He's wearing his breeches. So boy. Boy, 1865, 1865. Same year for both of them. This little guy looks tiny to me. He looks like he's just a little guy, but he's wearing breeches. So what does that tell us about his age? He's at least 5 years old. He could even be older, but he's at least 5. And what about this little guy? He's under 5. Yeah, he's under 5 years old. We don't know what. He could be 2. He's probably not. And by the way, they hadn't invented color photography in 1865. This is hand painted as well. So this is well done. Some of them are ham-handed. You see some where the photograph has been painted and it looks like a kid with a crayon colored on it. It's just like this blob of color. But this is well done. We've got his dress, even the little white ties here and the white, see, boat neck right here too. Same thing for the little boy. So by knowing the idea of breeching, it helps us to be able to date them. So boy or girl? Boy. How old? Yeah. He's actually 9. I happen to know that. This was, you know how the animal shelters take pictures of the dogs and say, don't you want to adopt this doggy? Well, photography was really pretty inexpensive. So they did the same thing with adoptable orphans. So adopt this kid was what this was a photograph of. Isn't he cute? Wouldn't you like to take him home with you? So, yeah, see, it works, doesn't it? Yeah. So this photograph right here, let me get these right. Flip. 1897, 1919. Boy or girl? Boy. Still a boy. Side part on the hair. Got a skirt on, but that's just because he's not been potty trained yet. So that's all. Okay, come back to this photograph. Remember her? Okay, I have to admit to you, I lied. I do know who this is, but I had to give you some photograph of something. So, and we're over time, and I apologize, but I wanted to, if we just have a moment to go through this one at least quickly. So we talked about clothing. What would you all guess for her? I hear 1880s, 1890s, and 1900s. 1850s. Okay, so we've got a high neck. We've got a little bit of a poof, but it's not tight from the elbow to the wrist. Her hair is parted in the middle, but it's not really poofy on the sides. Pretty straight skirt. What do you think? 1880s. Yeah. This is my great-great-grandmother, Marion Margaret Willman. This one kind of got me a little confused for a while because I looked at her face, and because she has light hair, I thought she's an older lady. I thought that was white hair I was looking at. I thought, okay, no, look at her clothes. If you look at her skin, she doesn't have wrinkles. She's not, clearly, if she's old, she's a really good, but think blonde. Oh, okay. If she's a blonde-haired young lady, then that makes more sense. She's pretty stylish for that time period. So, and that is about right for her. That's just before she got married. Her hand looks young. Her hand looks, yeah. So you look at the whole thing with this. One more? Sure. Okay. This one is a little bit trickier. Okay? I love this portrait. So we've got the high neck. We've got all the fancy work at the face. We've got a little bit of height to the hair here. Shoulders are on the shoulders. Let's just move so you can just really see. We could do this research down here. The Owen ground floor studio. Apparently not having to walk upstairs was a selling point for a photographer in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. What do you think?
1870s?
1870s?
I'm going to go before that. 1910s.
1910s? This one really was confusing to me because this was taken right before she got married, and she was born in 1877. So this can't be in 1870s. It was actually taken in 1902. There's Mary Rachel Fletcher, and there's her husband, Thomas Braden McConaughey. What's happened here, because I kept looking at this going, this is not a 1902 dress. There's nothing about what she's wearing that says 1902. There's nothing about her hair that says 1902. There's nothing about any of that says that. So what's the answer?
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia?
Maybe that's all she has.
Maybe that's all she had. So her mom's best outfit? I think that's probably what we're talking about here. Her husband, Thomas, this attractive man, who I looked at, it just breaks my heart when I look at this because this is my dad when he was younger. I mean, even that little goofy curl on the front, oh my goodness. She's married to this young man. She wants something pretty. He worked in a tin mill in Newcastle. Died, well, you can see how young he was when he died. Okay, she didn't live a whole lot longer after that, but a little bit more. She didn't. They were a poor family. Her parents were poor. She married a poor man, but she turned herself out pretty well for her wedding portrait, didn't she? Whether she borrowed her mother's best dress or she found this from this person and this from that person. So sometimes, I'm telling you this just as a warning, as a caveat, sometimes you will look at a portrait and you will say, this must be an 1870s picture. Because everything screams 1870s about that. And if we had no idea that that was Mary Rachel Fletcher, I would be sitting there looking at all my family, trying to figure out who this was, and attach it to the wrong person. Is there any way around that? Well, the only way really around it is going to be, with us, the fortunate thing we have would be this photographer right here, the Owen studio. I don't have it with me here in my notes, but if I looked it up, it tells me when he was a photographer in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. And it was starting in the late 1890s and then on after that. So if I have all the possible clues, then I might get the right person. I'm going to be confused forever about her dress. And if we didn't have that photographer's imprint on there, I don't know how we would be able to guess who that person was. And that's why I wanted to bring this in, is as much fun as it is to look at these clothes and make these guesses, sometimes things aren't going to match up to the way we think they're going to. And we were talking earlier at lunch about this, that the knowing history is an important part of genealogy. And that would be my plea, is by me knowing more about the family's history, it helps me to understand this is a poor family and that is not a poor woman's dress. There's too much work put into that for a woman who has got to be, scrubbing floors and taking care of kids and all that sort of thing. So there has to be some other explanation of what's going on.